Welcome, fellow dreamer. Tonight, I invite you to join me on a quiet journey back through time, to walk beside me through a day in the life of someone working at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. In the final days before the world would remember it forever. Together, we'll pass through the control rooms and cooling towers, the staff kitchens and locker-lined hallways. We'll feel the routine hum of machines, the rhythm of daily shifts, and the quiet assumptions that life would continue as it always had. This is a story of routine under pressure, of science, silence, and invisible risks. A glimpse into a place where ordinary workers, engineers, technicians, cafeteria staff, and security guards started their day not knowing it would soon become history. Before we begin, take a moment to dim the lights, find a quiet place to rest, and let yourself drift gently into the atmosphere of a world caught between calm and catastrophe. I created this video to help you relax, reflect, and slowly drift into sleep, guided by the forgotten moments and human stories behind the headlines. And, as always, I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from tonight? Let me know in the comments. It's moving to see how these stories connect dreamers across time and place. If this journey resonates with you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tap the bell icon so you'll always have a place to return when you're ready to fall asleep to stories from the past. Now, close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let our quiet walk through a day at Chernobyl begin. The morning light leaks through the sheer curtain like thin milk, pale and quiet. It doesn't wake you suddenly. It fills the room slowly, rising up the chipped walls, touching the shelves of neatly folded linens, and the poster of Lenin that watches you from the corner of the room. Your eyes open without urgency. The silence is soft and warm. It's another day, another shift, another April morning in Pripyat. Your room smells faintly of boiled cabbage and worn bedding. The radiator beneath the window rattled during the night, and you pull the wool blanket off in one slow sweep. The mattress beneath you is stiff, but you've grown used to its shape. You sit up. The air carries the muted scent of dust and soap, along with the dry hum of the building waking itself. You hear a neighbor walking heavily upstairs, their slippers slapping against the floor in a slow rhythm. The pipes groan. Somewhere down the hall, a child coughs. Your flat is small, but not unpleasant. It's a government tissue department, like every other one on this side of the city. Concrete walls painted a tired beige, brown linoleum that's curling at the edges. A single bookshelf containing a few science manuals, a copy of The Young Technician, and a faded red volume of Marxist theory you haven't touched in years. On your desk sits your plant passbook, 2 pens, a black and white photograph of your father in uniform, and a pocket calendar for 1986 with a red star in the corner. You tear off yesterday's square with quiet precision. In the kitchen, you light the stove with a practiced flick and put water on to boil. The kettle clicks unevenly. You open the cabinet and take down a tin of black tea and a half-used bag of barley rusks. The bread box is empty. The refrigerator hums dully in the corner, giving off a faint chill. There's milk inside, watery, but still good, and a leftover piece of pickled herring wrapped in wax paper. You pour the tea, sweeten it with a small spoon of sugar you've saved, and eat standing up by the window. Outside, the city is still. 6 stories below, the street is painted in long shadows from the angular buildings. You see a young woman with a red scarf walking toward the tram line, arms crossed tight. A worker in blue coveralls leans against a concrete wall, smoking, staring across the street at nothing in particular. A Lada rattles by. Beyond the city blocks, you glimpse the distant shape of Reactor 4, its skeletal towers poking into the pale sky like dull knives. The cranes surrounding it sit idle at this hour. You've looked at that shape every day for years and never really thought much of it. You dress slowly, buttoning your shirt all the way up and tying your boots with tired fingers. The uniform is familiar. Light blue plant-tissued trousers, a beige undershirt, and your brown jacket with the inside pocket stitched by your mother years ago. You tuck your passbook into that pocket, along with a folded note you never sent to your sister in Kyiv. Your identification tag is clipped to your belt. Your watch, still ticking, reads just past 6 o'clock. Your shift starts at 7. You still have time. Before leaving, you wash your face in the small tiled bathroom. The mirror is scratched, the sink basin cracked near the faucet. You brush your teeth with salt paste and a stiff brush, staring at your own reflection without really seeing it. The light above the mirror buzzes softly, then goes out. You flick it twice. It comes back on. You spit, rinse, and dry your hands on a thin towel hanging from a nail. Outside your apartment, the stairwell smells like metal, old newspapers, and damp mop water. You descend slowly, your boots tapping lightly against the concrete steps. Someone has scrawled glory to labor in chalk on the wall, half erased by someone else's sleeve or carelessness. You pass the ground floor mailboxes, many of them open or rusted shut, and step out into the morning air. The breeze is sharp, carrying the bite of early spring and the smell of chimney smoke. It's going to be a warm day. The sun glints off windows, catching on every flat surface and flashing like bits of broken glass. A line of birch trees sways lightly in the distance. Their new leaves are thin and green, almost translucent. You walk past the bakery, not yet open, and past the billboard of the smiling coal miner and his child beneath the phrase, "Peace, Labor, May." The same slogans are painted along the road near the plant, some barely visible under years of grime. You reach the tram stop just as the next car arrives, squealing to a halt on its rusted tracks. The door hisses open. Inside, the air smells like oil, iron, and the sharp temps of ozone. You find a place near the back and lean against the window. No one speaks. Everyone is in uniform. Plant workers, engineers, junior technicians, one man in a lab coat. You all face forward, not from rudeness, but from habit. The tram rattles forward, swaying with the tracks, its rhythm matching your own thoughts. You ride in silence past the grocery, the school, and the cinema with its peeling posters of the latest war film. You glance at the playground behind the school. A swing moves slightly in the wind. An empty seesaw rests like a broken scale. Two dogs chase each other along the edge of the path. At the final stop, you and a dozen others step out. Ahead stands the vast complex of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, wide. Gray, windowless sections stretch out like a massive concrete ship run aground. Steam curls from unseen vents. The cooling towers, always humming, rise above everything like sleeping giants. Armed guards watch from behind glass in the checkpoint tower. They recognize most of you, but you still present your badge and passbook. The air around the plant smells different, less like the city and more like machinery, hot stone, and distant water. You breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth. You nod to the guard. he opens the gate. Inside, you feel it. The hum of the generators, the drone of turbines, the faint buzz of fluorescent lights coming to life overhead. The workday begins the same way it always does. Just another shift, another clock to punch, another walk past warning signs you've long stopped reading. You move through the halls, and behind you, the door to the outside closes with a solid click. The door seals behind you with a solid thud that echoes slightly in the entry corridor. The lighting inside the plant is fluorescent, clinical, and unchanging. The colors here are all washed out whites, dull grays, and aging metallic blues. Nothing vibrant, nothing warm. The floor tiles are smooth and cool under your boots. Everything smells faintly of old wires, warm steel, and something else, something to clean, like antiseptic, mixed with dust and static. You've entered through the administrative access. Above you, the hallway leads to a row of security offices and a decontamination chamber. You don't need the latter today. Your assignment keeps you out of the high radiation zones, at least according to the schedule. Still, the procedures are the same. You sign in at the front desk, flip through a clipboard of log sheets, and add your initials next to the correct shift block. The security officer behind the glass doesn't look up. He's reading a newspaper, his cap tilted forward over his eyes. A cup of tea cooling on the counter beside him. A small black and white television set in the corner hums softly, the image flickering with a repeated loop of patriotic programming, the Soviet flag fluttering, soldiers marching, a factory bell ringing. You walk deeper into the plant, the familiar hum of machinery growing louder with each step. It's a low, persistent sound, part vibration, part electricity, almost like it lives in the walls themselves. Pipes run along the ceilings in neatly labeled bundles. Steam valves, copper wires, ducts, and pressure gauges cluster at regular intervals, like veins in the plant's skeleton. The further you walk, the more you feel like you're being absorbed by the place, drawn deeper into its silent, mechanical body. You pass by several engineers in pressed coveralls, white coats, and workers in dusty boots, headed toward the turbine hall. There's very little conversation. Most people nod, offer a polite debrouille outro. If they recognize you, then move along. Everyone has their tasks, and time, though nobody says it out loud, feels like it always runs short here. The locker room is tiled in beige, with low benches down the center and rows of metal cabinets on both walls. You know your locker by feel now. Third row, left side, one that sticks slightly when you turn the latch. You change quickly, exchanging your outside clothes for your plant uniform. Thick cotton overalls, soft gloves, rubber-soled boots, and your personal dosimeter clipped to your chest. You give it a tap. The needle stays low, just as it should. Nothing to worry about. Not here, not yet. As you suit up, a technician named Anton walks in, yawning behind a raised hand. His hair is damp, still wet from a rushed shower, and he's carrying a slice of dry bread with a strip of cheese folded over the top. You greet each other with a nod, and he mutters something about the early hour. How he forgot his cigarettes again, and how he hopes the night shift didn't mess up the gauge readings again. You say nothing. Anton talks to fill the silence. It's his way of keeping the nerves off his back. Once you're dressed, you head toward the control corridor. The plant is organized like a grid-long passageways, branching from a central spine, leading into reactor blocks, equipment rooms, and staircases that twist upward like narrow wells. Signs hang above doorways, printed in bold Cyrillic, warning workers where to go, where not to go, and which doors require clearance. You know your path by heart now. Left, right, up the short stairwell, then down the narrow hallway past Reactor 3's secondary access. Today, your assignment is maintenance observation in the outer control zone for Reactor 4. You're not inside the core control room itself. That's reserved for the senior engineers and reactor managers, but you're close. Close enough to feel the tension that always radiates from that part of the plant. Even on good days, the control room feels tight, careful, heavy with responsibility. There are too many dials, too many panels, too many switches with labels you only half understand. And behind those switches, you know, are reactions so precise and volatile that one wrong number on a gauge could mean an entire city wiped away in heat and dust. But that's not your job. Your job is smaller, simpler. Today, it means checking coolant valves, logging readings from peripheral monitors, and making sure the automatic doors between chambers are locking as they should. It's the kind of task that's more about rhythm than decision. Repetitive, technical, mechanical. You like it that way. It gives your thoughts a place to rest. You reach your station and report in. A supervisor hands you a clipboard and signs you into the log. There's a stack of papers to sort through, mostly routine. A few noted irregularities from the last shift, nothing serious. A slight discrepancy in the coolant output ratio, but that's common. The turbines always run hot this time of year, especially with spring maintenance underway. You make a note of it and move on. The turbine hall is nearby, and you pass by it briefly as you walk your circuit. The noise is immense, a roaring echo that fills the giant chamber like water. Massive machinery turns continuously, powered by the steam driven from the reactor core. Giant pipes curl through the room like the bones of some mechanical creature, hissing and clanking in rhythmic pulses. Workers in ear protectors move along narrow walkways high above the ground, inspecting gauges and tightening bolts with long wrenches. The air smells of oil, iron, and heat. Back in the quieter corridor, you check your first panel. Numbers blink in red and green. The readings are within expected range. You tap the glass with your knuckle and jot down the output. Your pen scratches softly against the paper, the only sound in this quiet stretch of hallway. You check a secondary valve room. Everything is in place. The hum of the reactor is more noticeable here, a soft, even vibration that you've long since stopped noticing. It lives in the soles of your boots now, like the distant rhythm of a train you never boarded. Occasionally, a voice crackles over the loudspeaker in clipped Ukrainian, announcing shift rotations or reminding workers to log dosimeter readings. You hear laughter echo once from a stairwell, a mechanic shouting something about a miscalibrated gauge. Then silence again. You continue your walk, step by step, panel by panel, tracing your little square of responsibility in a facility built on strict roles and quiet routine. You make your final check and sign off on your sheet. It's nearly time for the midday break. You return to the locker area, wash your hands in the metal sink stained with rust near the drain, and lean briefly against the wall. You don't think about what's inside the walls behind you. You don't think about how many tons of uranium fuel are humming away just a few rooms over. You've worked here too long to let your mind go down that path. You just wait for the lunch bell. You return to your assigned sector just before 9 o'clock. The corridors have become busier now. Boots echo down tiled passageways, Keys jangle from belts. Clipboards slap against thighs. Someone carries a box of new filtration components. It breathes. You glance at your schedule again, pinned to the inside flap of your clipboard. You're due in the secondary pump access corridor for inspection and testing of the auxiliary cooling valves. You've done it before, many times, in fact, but not often this close to a stress test. There's quiet discussion circulating about a late-night simulation to take place soon. Nothing official, just whispers passed between engineers and maintenance men in stairwells and at the coffee machine. Something about a test involving backup generators. You're not involved, but the mention lingers in the air like fine ash. The cooling valve corridor is warm today, more than usual. A dry kind of warmth that clings to the corners of the hallway and floats up through your collar. You log your first visual check. No leaks, no signs of corrosion. You make your way along the metal walkway, careful of the damp floor grates. Pipes of varying size and function run alongside you like veins, each labeled in fading Cyrillic stencils. Some haven't been painted in months, but you know them by feel now. At valve set 3A, you stop to take a reading. The dial is steady, maybe a touch low. You tap it gently and write down the pressure. From your belt pouch, you take a small wrench and check the tension on the bolt plate. It holds firm, but the metal feels slightly warmer than you expected for a morning shift with the main turbine load decreased. You tilt your head, listen for any hissing, any pulse of air escaping from a poor seal. Nothing. Still, you write a side note in the margin. You've learned not to ignore what your hands are telling you. Further down the hall, an electrical panel blinks with a red warning light. Not a major alarm, more of an advisory. You kneel beside it and read the digital display. It's a minor misalignment in the auxiliary water loop's feedback mechanism. Something that should have been reset last shift. The red light dims. You know the procedure calls for a report, so you mark it, though you're certain someone upstairs will ignore it. These minor anomalies come and go like summer gnats. Sometimes they matter. Most times they don't. You pass the time by counting steps between checkpoints, running numbers in your head, tracing old pipe routes you remember from your first month here. You think about how the plant sounds, always the same, a low mechanical sigh. You begin to notice when it changes. There's a flutter near one of the turbine access doors, an odd clicking, maybe electrical. You pause, put a hand on the frame, and feel no heat, no charge. Could be a motor in the wall behind the door, or something more distant, echoing strangely down the shaft. You file it mentally and move on. At one point, you meet Boris, a younger technician with sharp eyes and a habit of speaking too fast. He's crouched near a gauge cluster, muttering to himself and scratching his ear with the end of a pencil. You say hello. He grunts and keeps working, nodding once without looking at you. His boots are soaked at the sole, probably from a drip nearby, and you wonder if he's noticed. You make another note. You're not his supervisor, but one man's oversight can become another man's problem in a place like this. Before long, the scent of something metallic drifts into the corridor, faint, not alarming, but unfamiliar. It reminds you of scorched steel, the kind that clings to soldering wires after too many fuses pop. Time passes without clocks. In the plant, you feel time through your stomach and your knees. Hunger tells you when it's nearly lunch. Fatigue tells you how long you've been standing. When you check your watch, you're unsurprised to see it's nearly 11:45. Just enough time for one last circuit before the canteen opens. You make your final round through Valve Alley, your nickname for the narrow corridor lined with short, heavy-duty flow valves used to divert excess steam in case of overheating. They're old, Soviet-built in the late 70s, heavy and durable, but prone to sticking. At the far end of Valve Alley, you find the rightmost lever slightly loose. It still functions, but the resistance isn't as strong as it should be. A sticky latch, maybe. You test it again, and this time it slips a few degrees too far before catching, but not nothing. You leave the corridor slowly, lingering to ensure all logs are complete and posted. You glance once more at the central display: pressure normal, temperature stable, backup status green. All green. But you've been around long enough to know that green doesn't always mean safe. It just means no one's looking too hard. As you return to the main hall, the lights flicker slightly. Once, then hold steady. No one else reacts. You keep walking. The noise of boots and voices gets louder. The canteen will be full soon, just like always. You're hungry now and ready to sit. The weight of the morning settles into your shoulders, not heavy, just enough to remind you that this place is never really still, never truly at rest. Even when everything runs smooth, the plant breathes beneath you, and sometimes it changes how it breathes. The corridor narrows as you approach the canteen, and the smell of warm food reaches you before you ever step inside. It's a familiar combination: boiled potatoes, cabbage soup, bread warmed over from the morning, and the oily sweetness of beetroot from a tray of borscht cooling on the counter. These smells belong to routine. They are dependable, unchanging. They mask the scent of the plant itself, of oil, metal, and invisible radiation humming behind concrete walls. You fall into the line, sliding your tray along the rail like everyone else. The men around you look tired but calm. Some of them talk quietly, their voices low but fast, always in that same clipped tone common among men used to tight schedules and strict environments. You recognize most of them: operators from the upper control room, mechanics from Turbine Hall 1, and a group of younger trainees with pale faces and slightly oversized uniforms. One of them scratches at his neck nervously and keeps glancing at the wall clock, as though time were running out for something he doesn't fully understand. When it's your turn at the counter, you're handed a chipped ceramic bowl filled with borscht, a scoop of buckwheat porridge, and a slice of dark bread that's more crust than anything else. You nod in thanks without smiling. The woman behind the counter doesn't expect gratitude. She has served the same food in the same ladle-stiff motions for years. Her white apron is stained pink with beet juice, and the hairnet clings to her head like it was sewn into place. You carry your tray to a table near the far wall, where the light from the narrow windows falls flat and gray across the formica surface. There's a condensation ring from a mug left earlier, and the faint smell of vinegar from a discarded pickle jar. You sit down and begin to eat, spooning the soup slowly. The broth is thin but hot. The sour cream melts in white clouds across the surface. It isn't much, but it's warm, and right now, that's enough. Around you, the conversations pick up. Not about work, not directly. Instead, it's the soft, unguarded chatter of men briefly off duty. One technician mutters about the recent shortage of parts and how the last shipment from Kyiv arrived late. Another jokes about his son's obsession with Western rock music and how he caught him carving deep purple into the side of his desk. Someone mentions a planned fishing trip next month, And another man counters with a loud and half-serious complaint about never getting vacation approvals on time. Anton arrives with his tray and nods at you before sitting across the table. His tray is piled higher than yours. He always manages to get more bread somehow. He breaks one of the slices in half and slides it toward you without asking. You take it. Neither of you speaks right away. The table between you holds the quiet of shared routine. Eventually, he leans forward and says, "Did you hear about the test they're running tonight?" You glance up from your bowl. You had heard rumors, nothing clear, just fragments and half whispers. "I thought that was postponed," you reply. Anton shakes his head, chewing a piece of meat that looks tougher than rubber. "No, they're pushing it. It's coming from Moscow. Last-minute approval." He doesn't elaborate. He doesn't need to. That phrase, "coming from Moscow," is enough to explain everything and nothing at once. Orders from higher up always carry that opaque weight. No one questions them openly, and no one volunteers to be the man who disobeys. Across the room, a radio plays softly near the supervisor's table. A patriotic anthem drifts through the air. The same notes you've heard since childhood. Grand, rising chords that swell with pride even as the paint peels and the lights flicker. You glance up and see a portrait of Brezhnev staring down from the far wall, his eyes heavy-lidded and fixed somewhere above all of you, like a grandfather watching a family meal he never plans to join. As you eat, your eyes drift to the other tables. You study faces, unconsciously at first, then more deliberately. Everyone looks tired. Everyone seems normal. But there's a thread of something else, something you can't quite place. Running through the way people chew more slowly, glance more often toward the windows, and pause longer between sentences. It's not fear, exactly. It's awareness. A quiet intuition shared by people who spend too much time near things that could kill them. You finish your soup and scrape your spoon across the bottom of the bowl, trying to catch the last of the sour cream. Anton is already halfway through his porridge, eyes fixed on nothing in particular. He looks up once and says, "Valerie, in Control Room 4, has been complaining about the backup cooling for weeks. They told him to wait until next month's inspection." You nod and don't answer. The conversation is starting to slide into places that carry risk. In a facility like this, even casual remarks can turn heavy. There are ears everywhere, not official ones, maybe, but eyes that report and mouths that repeat what they hear. You've seen good men reassigned for less. The lunch bell sounds overhead, a soft chime that echoes across the walls like the toll of a hollow pipe. Men stand slowly, pushing back chairs, adjusting belts, clipping back their dosimeters. Trays are stacked neatly, bowls scraped clean. Anton swipes a second piece of bread off an abandoned tray and tucks it into his pocket. You both walk out together, saying nothing, falling back into the rhythm of the plant. The air outside the canteen feels cooler. The wind from the service corridor wraps around your neck and follows you back toward the workstations. Somewhere deep in the bowels of the plant, a valve releases pressure in a sudden hiss. You hear it through the floor, through your boots, through the walls. You look at Anton. He looks at you. No words are exchanged, but you both hear it. Returning from the canteen, you walk the corridor with the same steady pace you've used for years. Boots firm against the floor, eyes forward, clipboard under your arm. The midday break has pulled a quiet over the plant. Not a stillness exactly, but a lull in movement. the kind that comes with full stomachs and the slow return to concentration. The voices are lower now. The laughter that had echoed near the cafeteria doors is gone, replaced by the sound of machinery humming beneath your feet and doors clicking shut behind returning crews. The noise is the same, but it feels different. Everything feels a touch more fragile, though no one says as much. Your assignment for the afternoon is monitoring, a term that seems broad, almost vague, but in practice it means hours of checking output readouts, logging performance levels, and noting anomalies. You're stationed in the secondary control corridor, just adjacent to the main control room of Reactor 4, from where you sit. You can see its heavy, reinforced door, always slightly ajar, always guarded by the presence of silence more than any man. Inside, the senior operators work beneath rows of blinking lights and panels of switches, each one more complicated than the next. It's a space that commands deference. You don't go in unless you're told. That's understood. You take your seat at the observation console near the outer control grid. The desk is metal, painted a faded shade of green, its corners worn to bare steel. The equipment is familiar: readout dials, panel switches, analog indicators lined in red and white. There's a comforting rhythm to it, a predictability that lulls the mind into method. You switch on the monitor. The screen flickers once, then stabilizes. You adjust the knob and begin your sequence. Temperature readings are stable. Pressure within expected ranges. Coolant flow remains constant, though you notice it's edging toward the higher end of tolerance. Not critical, not even concerning, really, but notable. You jot it down without fanfare. It's the sort of detail that might appear again tomorrow, in another logbook, another hand, or maybe not. In a facility this large, paper stacks fast and thick. Not everything survives scrutiny. The clock on the wall ticks toward 1:40. You hear footsteps approaching and glance up to see a supervisor making his rounds. He nods to you, barely slowing, as he scans the clipboard hanging by the door. His uniform is crisp, and he carries the blank-eyed look of someone used to reading data rather than interpreting it. You exchange no words. He moves on. The desk fan hums faintly beside you, blowing warm air across your arms. The room is growing hotter, though you can't tell if it's the ambient temperature or your own rising awareness. You lean back, stretch your legs slightly, and roll your neck. The readouts blink at you, steadily, obediently. A slow parade of numbers that mean either nothing or everything, depending on the moment. You think again about the test. The one no one will talk about directly, supposedly scheduled for some time past midnight. You're not on the night shift, but you've heard the tension in the voices of those who are. Something about reducing reactor power, testing backup power systems, and running the turbine rundown under different safety conditions. It sounds complex. It sounds important. It also sounds rushed. At 2:15, you receive a printout from the main instrumentation bank. You scan the values. Most are normal. One of them, a power level output, catches your eye. It's lower than expected, even for reduced load hours. You circle it lightly and note the time. Likely the early steps of test preparations, though no one has mentioned it formally. You clip the paper into the daily log and file it without discussion. You've learned to observe, not to ask. The room remains quiet. A pair of junior technicians walks past the door, whispering to each other in quick Ukrainian. Something about a circuit board error near the reserve water pumps. One of them carries a schematic rolled under his arm. You watch them go, and for a moment, You consider standing up and following them, just to see, just to understand. But your job is here, at this panel, in this chair, with these readings. That's the structure of the plant. Each piece in place. As the afternoon stretches on, the monotony becomes its own form of comfort. You fall into the pattern. Read, log, compare, file. The sound of the typewriter clicking in the records room echoes faintly through the walls. Somewhere far off, a maintenance trolley squeals around a corner. The mechanical life of the plant continues, all moving parts engaged in repetition like muscle memory stretched across concrete. You're halfway through a second chart when the lights above dim, just briefly, barely for a second, and return to normal. You pause, not long enough to be considered a blackout, just a flicker. You glance at the main readouts. Everything is still within operational parameters. You make a note anyway, more out of habit than concern. But you glance toward the control room again, this time for a little longer. At 3:30, a routine check confirms that coolant flow has slightly increased again. Nothing dramatic, but now enough to catch your attention. You go back through the earlier readings. It's a slow build, almost imperceptible in the moment. You don't raise an alarm. You don't have reason to, but you add a second asterisk beside the last entry and underline the notation. You'll leave it for the evening shift to see. The room feels closer now. The hum of the equipment seems a little louder. The fan clicks once, then starts spinning again. The air tastes drier, though the window hasn't been opened since last summer. You adjust your collar. The clock reads 3:47. In a quiet moment, your mind drifts, briefly, to your apartment in Pripyat. You think about your neighbor, who always slams his door. You think about the fish you meant to buy this morning, but forgot. You think about the small package your sister promised to send, with sweets and postcards from Kyiv. You wonder if it arrived yet. You wonder if you'll remember to check your box before the weekend. Then, just as quickly, your mind returns to the screen. The final check before shift change shows everything where it should be, or at least where it was yesterday. You gather your papers, clip them together, and place the stack on the edge of the desk for the next man. You leave a short note with a line of caution about the pressure increases. Not urgent, just watchful. Then you stand, stretch your arms, and exit the room, the door clicking shut behind you. The corridor is nearly empty now. The afternoon is fading. Outside, the light has shifted into a soft gold, filtering through the high windows and casting thin shadows across the floor. You walk without speaking. The plant breathes round you. And though you don't know it yet, everything is beginning to change. The sun begins to sink as you step back out into the corridor. The light coming through the narrow upper windows has turned a deeper shade of gold, almost orange, casting long diagonal shadows across the tiled floors and bare concrete walls. The hallway is quieter now, not quite empty, but subdued. The afternoon shift is thinning, giving way to the evening crew, and there's a kind of hush in the air, not solemn exactly, but still, like the building is holding its breath between routines. The familiar smells of the plant, machine oil, warm circuitry, chemical disinfectant, seem sharper in the cooling air. You walk down the hall without hurry, your boots making hollow taps against the floor. Most of the technicians have dispersed. You pass only one or two others. A young man you don't recognize, reading a clipboard with furrowed brows, and a janitor wringing out a gray mop into a dented metal bucket. The janitor gives you a look of recognition, but says nothing. You return the nod and continue past. You stop by the locker room to grab your sweater, something you keep there for nights like this, when the chill creeps in through the ventilation and settles around your shoulders. The wool is scratchy but warm. You pull it over your uniform and sit on the wooden bench for a moment, elbows on knees, watching the light shift through the grimy windows. You check your watch. It's not late, just past 6 in the evening, but the quiet makes it feel later. Time behaves differently inside these walls. Without natural sounds, birds, distant traffic, even the rustle of leaves, hours stretch and bend, measured only by bells and beeping monitors. A few minutes later, you begin your rounds again. The monitoring tasks for the evening are lighter than they were earlier in the day. Most of the heavy inspections are completed before the shift change, and now it's a matter of reviewing readouts, watching panel activity, and flagging any changes that might need escalation. The work is the same, but the atmosphere is not. There's a subtle tension in the air, not dramatic, not immediate, but like something mechanical ticking just beneath the surface. You feel it in the silence between footsteps. You feel it in the way everyone speaks with slightly lower voices. You pass near the outer section of the control room. The door remains slightly open, as always, revealing little more than the edge of the main panel desk and a tangle of wires coiled beneath it. Through the gap, you hear voices, low, steady, with the occasional rattle of paper. The night shift engineers are arriving. Their energy is different, focused, a little more clipped. These are the men responsible for overseeing the test that has been quietly circling through conversation all day, though no one has given it official status. You glance at the red shift schedule pinned beside the door. Some of the names have been scratched in hastily, last-minute changes. You don't ask why. You continue toward the secondary instrumentation room. It's near the turbine hall, where the hum of machinery is constant and the temperature always runs higher. As you walk, the overhead lights flicker again, just briefly, and resume. It's happened before, nothing unusual. But in the stillness of the hallway, the moment stretches. You pause, staring at the wall as the buzzing returns to normal. Then you keep moving. The instrumentation room is dimmer than it was earlier. Only half the ceiling fixtures are lit, casting the space in a soft, uneven glow. You sit down at the terminal and log in the new set of parameters. The screen stutters as it refreshes, slowly upward. You scan each one, pausing now and then to compare them with earlier entries. Everything appears within range, but the coolant return rate has remained stubbornly high. Not dangerous, but persistent. You file the notation with the others. You're not the only one who has noticed it, judging by the stack of clipped reports left beside the console. A few of them have handwritten comments in the margins, questions left unanswered. You resist the urge to add one of your own. These kinds of questions rarely receive follow-ups. At a plant like this, with a hierarchy as thick as the concrete walls, small irregularities tend to vanish into the bureaucratic void, absorbed, ignored, or deferred, until they become someone else's problem. There is a phone mounted on the wall. It hasn't rung all day. Its presence feels heavier in the quiet. At around 7:10, a technician you recognize enters the room. Andre, a calm, even-tempered man you've worked with many times before. He greets you with a quick nod, checks the clipboard, and begins reviewing the turbine flow chart. You both work in silence for several minutes, occasionally swapping pages or pointing to an indicator. You don't need to talk. You've done this enough times that the shared rhythm of the job is its own kind of conversation. Eventually, Andre speaks, his voice low. They're reducing the reactor's output now. You look at him without answering, waiting. They're starting the rundown for the test tonight. You both stare at the screen for a moment. The numbers have begun to shift, slowly, adjusting to the lowered power threshold. Still within safe range, but different. You nod, I figured. He doesn't elaborate. You both return to your tasks. The silence stretches on, and though there's no direct reason to feel uneasy, the air begins to carry something weightier. You hear a door close in the distance, then faint footsteps fading down the corridor. You hear nothing else for several minutes. At 7:45, you close the logbook and check the wall clock. Your part of the evening is nearly done. You'll hand off the station to the next technician soon. You rise from your chair, stretch your back, and let out a long, tired breath. The screen continues, blinking behind you. You leave the instrumentation room and walk slowly through the hallway toward the changing area. The corridor is almost entirely empty now. The sun has dipped below the horizon, and the plant has taken on that strange, half-lit state it wears after dusk, half shadow, half fluorescent glare. Outside the narrow windows, the lights of Pripyat begin to flicker on, one by one. Small yellow squares lined up along the horizon. You glance once more toward the control room door as you pass. It remains slightly ajar. The voices inside are louder now, sharp, focused, urgent in tone, if not in volume. You don't stop. At your locker, you remove the sweater and fold it back into its corner. You change slowly, brushing dust from your sleeves, removing the dosimeter from your belt, and logging the final reading. It falls well within acceptable range. You sign your name beside the entry. Your coat feels heavier than usual as you slip it on. Perhaps it's the hour, or the light, or something else entirely. You exit through the same corridor you've walked 100 times. Out past the metal door, down the small concrete steps, into the open air. The chill wraps around your shoulders, brushing against your cheeks. The sky is dark now. The stars have not yet appeared. Behind you, the plant hums on, and for now, everything is still in place. You exit the perimeter gate just after 8 o'clock, your breath forming faint clouds in the evening air. The guards at the checkpoint don't look up as you pass. One smokes silently, arms folded, cap tilted back. The other half watches a small, portable television that sits, flickering with gray static, on a low table inside the glass booth. No one asks for your badge. At this hour, everyone knows who's coming and going. The world outside the plant is quiet, and after the steady hum and clatter of machines, the silence is disorienting. The sudden absence of noise makes you feel like you've stepped into a painting where everything is still, but not lifeless. The walk back into town is familiar, traced by habit more than thought. You follow the path that runs along the edge of the woods and skirts the tram line before curling back toward the apartment blocks of Pripyat. The sky overhead has darkened to a rich indigo. Streetlights begin to glow in long, pale rows, some flickering to life one at a time, others buzzing softly like trapped insects. The air smells like damp concrete, fresh-cut grass, and the distant trace of burning wood from a stove somewhere deep in the residential buildings. Ahead, you see the silhouettes of the tower blocks, standing tall and repetitive. Each one is nearly identical, rectangular concrete slabs rising 6 to 10 floors, with repeating balconies and small curtained windows. They are not beautiful, but they are functional. They are what the state has provided. From many of the windows, dull yellow light spills onto the balconies. Curtains are drawn back. Some reveal glimpses of families seated around tables. Others show television screens flickering blue in quiet rooms. You pass a group of children playing near the base of one building. They chase each other in circles, their laughter sharp and clean in the still air. A soccer ball bounces across the pavement. One boy kicks it too hard, and it rolls toward you. You stop it with your boot and pass it back without a word. They thank you with a nod, barely pausing before returning to their game. It is late, but school is out for the weekend, and the warm air is an invitation no child resists. Further along, you pass the supermarket, closed for the evening. The large windows are covered in hand-painted signs advertising butter, fish, sugar, and black bread. The shelves inside are half-stocked. A stray cat sits by the door, licking its paw and watching you with wide eyes. Somewhere down the block, a radio plays a Soviet pop song, the tune faint and echoing off the tiled facade of a pharmacy. As you reach your building, the door creaks open with that same familiar groan. You take the stairs, 2 at a time, out of habit more than energy, and reach your apartment on the 4th floor. The door clicks as you turn the key. Inside, the apartment is cool and dim. You flip the switch. The light overhead hums to life. The furniture is as you left it. The armchair by the window, the table cluttered with tea mugs and an unfolded newspaper, the bookshelf still missing its 3rd shelf, and the faintest impression of warmth left in the air from the morning. You remove your coat, hang it on the hook beside the door, and take off your boots. You cross the room and glance out the window. Below, a few people still walk the paths between buildings, some couples, arms linked and heads low in conversation, others alone, heading home from a late shift or an evening errand. A trolleybus rumbles by on the road beyond the trees, its headlights casting twin cones of light onto the pavement. The apartment smells faintly of old tea and the radiator's last heat. You put a kettle on the stove and drop 2 slices of bread into the small toaster. While they warm, you open the cabinet and retrieve a jar of cucumber pickles and the tin of black tea you always ration carefully. You sit at the table and eat slowly, savoring the quiet. The tea is strong and slightly bitter, the bread dry but filling. In the other room, you turn on the television. The state news is still broadcasting grainy footage of factory construction, steel production quotas, and smiling officials speaking from a podium. You watch with half interest, the voice of the anchor fading into the background. Eventually, the images shift to a nature documentary, something about bears in the Siberian forest. You let it play while you change clothes, folding your uniform and setting it aside on the small chair in the corner. You settle into the armchair as the sky darkens fully. You light the small lamp beside you and open the newspaper, flipping past the headlines about agriculture reforms and diplomatic meetings. You pause on an article about the city of Pripyat itself, praising its modern planning, its parks, its proximity to one of the most advanced nuclear facilities in the Soviet Union. You smirk faintly. The city is young. Everyone says so. Modern, clean, a shining example of Soviet engineering. And in many ways, it is. But you've lived here long enough to know that surface impressions rarely reveal the full picture. Outside your window, a group of teenagers walks by, laughing too loud, passing a bottle of something in a paper bag. They vanish down the alley. A woman carrying a basket of laundry steps out onto her balcony and begins hanging up shirts, humming to herself in the night air. The world, for now, continues. You glance at the clock, nearly 9:30. The late shift will be underway by now. Reactor 4's output should be falling steadily as part of the test sequence. You imagine the engineers standing before their panels, fingers hovering over switches, eyes watching gauges tick slowly downward. You wonder if they feel the pressure, if they suspect anything unusual, but you push the thought aside. The plant has always run with rigid discipline, with layers of safety built into every procedure. That's what they tell you. That's what you believe. You get up to rinse your cup and glance again through the window. The lights of Pripyat stretch out in tidy rows, interrupted only by the dark trees and the pale shine of the river in the distance. Beyond them, faint and shadowed, you can just make out the vague outline of the plant itself. Even at this hour, the cooling towers are still visible against the night sky, silent, still, standing watch. The city doesn't sleep early. There are still lights in the building across from yours. A television screen flickers behind pale curtains. Someone opens a window and smokes quietly on the ledge. Somewhere nearby, a dog barks once, then falls silent. You turn off the lamp, walk into your bedroom, and lie down on the narrow mattress. The blanket is thin but warm. The sheets smell faintly of soap and sun from the last time they were aired out on the balcony. You stare at the ceiling for a while, letting your breath slow. The room is quiet. Only the distant hum of the refrigerator and the occasional groan of the pipes keeps you company. As you close your eyes, you think of the plant again, not with fear, not with urgency, but simply as a part of life, as routine, as something enormous and constant that exists just outside your control. Sleep comes gradually. The city exhales around you, and somewhere in the dark, the next hour begins. The room is dark now, save for the dull orange glow of the street lamp outside your window. Its light slices through the blinds in narrow, regular strips, falling across the floor in a pattern that shifts ever so slightly with the turning of the night. You lie still, head resting against a flat pillow that smells faintly of soap and sun-bleached linen. The sounds of the city, already minimal, have thinned into silence. No more footsteps in the hallway, no creaking doors from the neighbors. Even the usual low murmur of a late television show seems to have faded. It's as though the entire building has settled into sleep in one long exhale. Your eyes adjust slowly to the dark. You can still make out the familiar outlines of the furniture. The bookshelf, half full with state-printed novels and worn manuals. The armchair by the window where your jacket still hangs. The framed photograph of your family on the dresser, slightly askew. These objects anchor you. They make the room feel real, permanent, unthreatening. You shift slightly under the blanket, pulling it higher across your chest as a thin draft slips in beneath the window pane. The radiator clicks once and falls silent. Outside, Pripyat sleeps. The buildings are quiet now. Tower blocks line the streets like silent sentinels, their windows dark or dimmed. The glow of street lamps glistens faintly off the pavement, still damp from yesterday's rain. In some corners, trash bins sit undisturbed. Bicycles lean against benches left behind by children earlier that day. A few cats roam between shadows. Somewhere near the edge of town, a guard dog barks twice and then goes quiet again. The trolleybuses have long stopped running. Their empty carriages, parked in the depot like metallic skeletons, their windows darkened, their seats vacant. Your thoughts drift, as they often do at this hour, not about the plant or the shifts or the pressure gauges that filled your afternoon. Instead, your mind wanders through smaller things, quiet things. You think about your sister in Kyiv and whether she managed to visit this summer. You think about the book you left half-read on the nightstand, a collection of travel stories that speak of foreign places you may never see. You think about your neighbor's baby, who cries most mornings but didn't make a sound today. For a moment, you are aware of the silence, not as an absence of noise, but as a kind of fullness. There is something in the air, not a sound, not a movement, but a presence. Like a breath being held just out of sight, you try to dismiss it. Nights often carry strange feelings, especially in a city built on concrete and order, where life moves on tracks and shifts. But still, the thought clings like dust. You close your eyes, but sleep resists you at first. Your mind drifts again, retracing the walk home, the stillness of the corridors. The way the lights inside the plant seemed slightly dimmer, as though unsure of themselves. You think of Anton's words, quiet but certain. They're starting the rundown for the test tonight. And you wonder what they're doing now, inside those concrete walls, under those fluorescent lights. You picture the control room, with its endless dials and blinking panels. You imagine the operators speaking in hushed tones, following instructions printed in thick manuals, flipping switches in a sequence passed down from above. You don't feel fear, not exactly. It's something gentler, something like unease, the kind of feeling that settles into the bones but never makes itself fully known. You tell yourself it's just the lateness of the hour, the weight of a long day, the cold air beneath the window. And in some sense, you believe it. Time passes. Eventually, your breathing deepens. The hum of the refrigerator in the next room becomes a kind of lullaby. The radiator clicks once more and then grows still. Your fingers twitch slightly as sleep creeps in, soft and slow, wrapping itself around your body like a second blanket. The mattress creaks beneath your shifting weight, but you do not stir again. Outside, the night continues. Above the rooftops, the sky is cloudless and dark, dotted faintly with stars. The moon hangs low, partly hidden behind a drifting strip of cloud. No wind stirs the trees lining the parks and avenues. The fountains in the city center are still. The amusement park stands silent, its Ferris wheel unmoving, each seat empty and swaying gently in the nighttime air. Closer to the plant, the compound remains lit. Security lights cast pale circles onto the pavement. A truck idles near one of the outbuildings, its driver smoking quietly in the cab, radio playing faintly behind the glass. Inside the plant, men move between rooms, marking clipboards, adjusting valves, watching dials. They follow instructions. They trust their instruments. They have done this before. In Reactor 4, power levels are shifting, slowly, methodically, descending to prepare for the overnight test. Control rods are being adjusted. Cooling systems are in standby. There are discussions about timing, about protocol, about compliance. A few engineers frown. Some notes don't align exactly, but there is no panic. There is no alarm. The procedure continues. Back in your apartment, you sleep. You do not hear the phone ring down the hall in the plant. You do not hear the quiet conversation that follows, nor the footsteps moving quickly across a tiled floor. You do not hear the door to the backup room open or the switch being flipped. You are far from those machines now. You are here, in your bed, breathing slowly, dreaming of a place you cannot name. And still, Pripyat sleeps. The lights in the buildings fade one by one. The city exhales. The streets grow emptier. The night deepens. Somewhere, a curtain flutters gently in the open air. A faucet drips once in a kitchen sink. A child rolls over in her crib. A man turns in his bed. A woman shuts off her reading lamp. Everything remains still. And somewhere, something begins to change. But for now, everything is quiet. You are asleep. And the world has not yet woken up.